Welcome, everybody, to the Rice Report here on July 27th, 2023. The Rice Report, let me simplify it for you. We try to get you information or news that the news doesn't give, because that news can be very important. What we try to do is get you some information, some dots, so that you can connect them on your own and think critically through the world around you, which is ever-changing and constantly confusing and distracting. So I want to hop right into it and give you the news that we're seeing really over the last 5 to 7 days. A few things that everyone's talking about that we can see that are very obvious. We have the Hunter Biden plea deal fell apart. We know that he now cannot use drugs or alcohol, or he will be found guilty. So we'll see how that works out. Seems like that's a challenge for old Hunter. But in the middle of this, there was also a meeting with Mayorkas and the border. The border is a gigantic issue here in the United States. I'm going to tie this together for you here in the end, hopefully in about 15 minutes. But the border crisis that we're seeing in the United States is not unique. It's not new. It's been happening in multiple countries all around the world, and it's causing havoc. And there are proven track records behind green energy craziness and open borders that are not leading to a good outcome, potentially here in the United States. But in the middle of all these big topics, these big things, we have big economic problems, societal issues. The world at large seems to want you to focus in on aliens. So we're not going to talk about aliens because that is the distractionary news out there. So we're going to hop right into some things that are important. I will giggle along the way because I have been doing this a very long time, and some things that I see being pumped out in the media just kind of make me laugh. You shouldn't fall for some of these things. There are verifiable ways to prove that some of these things are just complete nonsense. For instance, this morning, the UN chief came out today and said that global warming is no longer an issue. We are entering into the entering into the phase of global boiling. That is correct. There are aliens coming, and the world is going to boil into an oblivion. If you really boil this down into what it is, it's a fear-mongering campaign. And this fear will keep you from paying attention to things that matter, that can help you make better decisions in your life for you, your finances, and your family. So let's hop into this. Get a little historical background behind the climate change agenda, which is an agenda. I'll say it again here on camera because I'm not afraid to say it. The Green New Deal, which is kind of code worded as the Inflation Reduction Act. By the way, 2 senators have said that it's the same thing already, so I'm not drawing that conclusion. They've said it. This whole process that we're looking at is one of the largest confidence scams in the history of the United States. I know that's going to ruffle some feathers for people who really believe in the environmental change, and I'm not against creating more sustainable ways of creating energy. Unfortunately, I'm logical, so I like to have energy when I need it, and that comes strictly from oil, gas, and coal at the moment. Hopefully, nuclear in the future. Now, the green energy agenda. If you really look at the long tail plan through Agenda 2030, you'll see that it's about a $125 trillion confidence scam. This is essentially the largest transfer of wealth in human history. And I call it that because the evidence is not there to deem that I'm wrong. Over the past decade, $10 trillion has been invested into ESG and green energy projects, which has actually increased solar and wind consumption by a little more than 2.5%. So this, not looking at a big impact. $10 trillion should get you more of an impact on global energy, a lot more than 2.5%. So it is what it is. I love that we're augmenting existing energy with cleaner sources. Don't get me wrong. I think that's a great thing. But here are some facts that we need to address as a nation and logically. Number one, earlier today, a report came out that coal consumption is now at an all-time high. Coal. So the demand for coal consumption is at an all-time high. I will remind you that China right now is on schedule to build 2 coal plants per week, while America is focusing in on wind, energy, and transgenderism. These are big problems that we need to address and stay focused on. The demand for oil has now surpassed 2018 numbers. So we've gotten through the pandemic. We went through all that kind of stuff. We are now rebounding back to a higher demand level globally for oil and gas than we saw in 2018. Now, this whole push for green energy has its issues. One of the things that I talk about all the time is the fact that in order to build a battery for an electric vehicle, you actually need anywhere between 600 and 800 barrels of oil to get it done. You also need to move about 250,000 tons of dirt, which requires diesel energy to get to the cobalt and the lithium. So what happens when you build an EV is you've actually already created what's called an offsetting emission. These emissions that are offsetting are 13 years worth of full combustion engine usage. So you're actually just better off keeping the car you have and driving it for 13 years. That's essentially what the math equates to. Now, EVs themselves are thought of as being the savior of the planet because, of course, the planet's boiling and aliens are coming. But in the middle of all this, we have to look at EVs and what's happening. Recently, 2 days ago, the Dutch Coast Guard is still trying to put out a fire from a carrier ship that was caused by a lithium-ion battery from an EV exploding. This fire is expected to burn for anywhere between 4 to 5 days and destroy all the cargo on the ship. That is a gigantic carbon emission into the environment created by EVs. So these are, again, not an opinion. These are just dots to connect and facts. On top of this, we have to look at economic impacts of over-focusing on the fear of the climate agenda change. If we look at this from a perspective internationally, we can look at the nation of Germany. Germany has been very, very aggressively pursuing the Green New Agenda, the Green New Deal. They have open borders. They have massive migrant problems, overpopulation occurring there, along with a green energy initiative. So I won't boil it down into too many things, but I will say that the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines were blown up. They have been short on natural gas for a while. They're now drilling, they're getting ready to drill for their own natural gas and oil, of which they have plenty of reserves. But in the midst of this, what's the actual outcome? I like to look at stats and I like to look at outcomes. Germany, heavily focused on green energy, open borders. End result, 2 days ago, the IMF came out basically and said that they expect the German economy to be the lowest performing or worst performing economy, major economy in the world. You can look at Sri Lanka, you can look at multiple nations with high ESG scores and open borders. The end result is extensive amounts of bankruptcies, currency failures, and economic failure. That is the end result there. That is a non-debatable fact that exists, and it's one that we need to pay attention to and focus more on actual energy production through oil, gas, and even potentially coal. Now, I will address the Nord Stream 1 and 2 because when this happened, when the Nord Stream 1 and 2 blew up, of course, it was blamed on Russia, and then it was blamed on Ukraine, and then people started realizing perhaps it was us. This is something I said. I was called crazy months ago for saying that I don't know who blew it up. I wasn't there. It wasn't anything that I can actually state. But what I can state is that after the 2 pipelines blew up, the price of natural gas in America rose for a bit and then tanked down to about $2. At the same time, 1 unit of natural gas was selling for $28 in Europe. What was happening during that duration is the United States government was buying up a lot of natural gas here at $2 and selling it in Europe for $28. That was the biggest pad to the GDP report during the midterm elections and the first quarter of this year, period. If you remove the sale of liquid natural gas, our GDP was negative, basically telling us we're still in a recession because we were in a recession beforehand, but they changed the terms and then they padded the stats. I'm going to state that boldly. I really don't care to debate. I mean, it's pretty obvious at this point if you read the GDP reports, which just came out today. Our GDP report, which I have not read, it just came out today. I've been working all day. Our GDP report today came out at a positive 2.4% growth rate. Along with a few days ago, they came out and said inflation was at 3%, and then the Fed hiked interest rates by 1/4 point. Now, these are definitely corollary activities that don't seem to correlate, and they don't seem to correlate with reality. So while we've seen extensive layoffs, we've seen potential strikes that are occurring with UPS, the train workers, and the longshoremen on the West Coast. In the middle of all of that, we're supposed to believe that our government or that our gross domestic product has grown by 2.4%. Mike Pence, a presidential candidate, think of him what you will, he actually came out boldly and said that inflation is actually near 16%. I will say this, that I believe that they are modifying, they are augmenting, they are embellishing, they are not telling the truth in government reports. And there's probably a specific reason behind that I don't know for certain, of course, but I have my own thoughts, which I'll discuss. But I think it's important right now to read this information and then look at the real world. So when we look at GDP growth, inflation, and the Fed raising interest rates, I can tell you firsthand, I have my own social media pages and I get a lot of information from real people, real boots on the ground. I can tell you with certainty that the credit markets are shrinking. People are having trouble borrowing money. People are having trouble getting cash out of the bank, which I'm going to go into in just a moment. And I can tell you firsthand that there are far more people losing jobs than there are gaining jobs. The jobs reports, statistically, Peter St. Onge did a great job of breaking down statistically the fact that 14 consecutive jobs reports have beat their own estimates. The BLS has beat their own estimates and Wall Street 14 consecutive times. Of those 14 jobs reports, 2 to 3 months later, they readjust them down, over 100,000 jobs. If that doesn't tell you to be cautious of this information, I don't know what will. Statistically speaking, to beat their own estimates and Wall Street 14 consecutive times, That's a 1 in 16,000%, or 1 in 16,000 chance. These are stats that are staggering. This is information that's usually very crucial to economic forecasting. And to be honest with you, the market is not reacting. The last jobs report, which on MarketWatch, they put on MarketWatch that this was the best jobs report that you could possibly expect, yet the market went down 126 points. People are not buying this information for very specific reasons. Now, on top of this, speaking of the Fed, the Federal Reserve has had an emergency meeting that they're in right now. This is about Basel III, international Basel III regulations. This meeting is designed to understand how the credit markets will be tightened moving forward. It's also discussing how they're going to raise capital requirements for residential mortgages, along with specifically targeting and identifying regional banks so that they have a new way of actually posting unrealized gains and losses. They didn't say anything about major banks, just regional banks. They have to redo the way they structure their unrealized gains and losses. We'll see what comes out of that meeting. It is an emergency meeting that they're going through. If you don't understand Basel III, I'll certainly go through it in a few weeks. There's Basel III and Basel IV. These are big things that are happening that you definitely do not hear about on MSNBC, CNN, any of these places, even Fox. Now, in the middle of this, we have to think about the banking world. So the banking world that we see right now, we've kind of just blown by the fact that 2 of the 3 largest bank collapses in U.S. history just occurred. 2 of the 3 largest banking collapses in the United States, the history of the United States, just occurred. But if you listen to Janet Yellen, who is as reliable as the jobs report, she will actually tell you that everything is fine and they have banking figured out. Well, if they did, they wouldn't be having emergency meetings about new capital requirements for residential lending, which will cause ripple effects in the real estate market moving forward. And they certainly wouldn't be discussing why regional banks have to redo the way that they structure unrealized gains and losses. So let me tell you a little story of how nationalized banking would occur. If I wanted to create a nationalized banking arena, one that I could completely put into a socialist structure and control people's money forever, I would do a few things. Before I got into the really big moves, I would make sure that the largest banks that exist get taxpayer money to make profits. JP Morgan received $50 billion to buy First Republic. They just turned a $2.7 billion profit this quarter on that bank, on that transaction, of which the American taxpayer will never see a penny. All we do is foot the bill for the $50 billion. The next thing that I would do, after making sure that my largest, most compliant banks with my government, that they were safe and secure, I would find a way to eliminate competition. And I would eliminate competition in many different ways. I would create a banking crisis of mass proportion, or I would implement small measures. One of them is called FedNow. If you haven't heard of FedNow, it launched on July 20th. FedNow is marketed as a program that allows for banks to make bank-to-bank instant transactions over the weekend. So instead of changing the way banks work, they wanted to implement a new software system. This type of software they're implementing is called friction technology. That friction makes it more difficult to take money out of the bank. Now, with FedNow, marketed as an instant payment system that'll make life so much better, part of the reading behind OP 1670, which is the document that was approved in 2019, OP 1670 clearly states that from now on, in compliant banks that are using FedNow, which is about 157 of them right now, including the big ones, right now, your banking information is full reign for intelligence agencies, the FBI, the CIA. Anybody can go into your bank account and find out how you spend your money. They can shut down your bank account if they don't like what you're spending it on or what you say on social media. This is really the first step of implementation of complete tyranny, or what other people would call financial censorship. Sounds paranoid, doesn't it? Except for the fact that CBS LA today came out with a very good article stating that bank accounts are being shut down without warning right now. I'm going to repeat. FedNow launched July 20th. This is July 27th. That is 7 days, 1 week. There are already reports on places like CBS, who normally wouldn't report these things, saying that bank accounts are being shut down without warning, without reason. So we'll find out what the reasons are in the future, but it's important to note that right now FedNow is in play and your spending habits and assets are being tracked as we speak. Upon having this implemented, I would implement something called, I don't know, a world coin or a cryptocurrency that you could use all over the world. I would make sure that you gave me your retina scan so that you could use this world coin so that you could spend your own money. This also sounds like a conspiracy theory, except for the fact that in China and 3 other nations, every 8 seconds, someone is getting their retina scan so they can use what equates to a central bank digital currency. Now, the central bank digital currencies, if you're not familiar with it, that would be basically removing cash from the system, creating a digital currency that's completely controllable and completely monitored by the US government or any government that offers a CBDC. Many people have said it's conspiracy theory, except for the fact that Russia just went to the digital ruble. That's a CBDC. We've experimented in the UK, Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, and parts of the United States have already had small implementations of the CBDC. I talk to people about this all the time, and I consistently hear that you're paranoid that'll never happen in America. Now, I am an American. As you can see behind me, I love this country. I will give anything for God, family, and country. And more importantly, I want to give the truth to people. I don't know what's happening. I'm just a guy sitting in a room in front of a camera. But at the same time, I pay attention to everything. God's kind of given me that gift to pay attention and to assimilate information. And I also look at facts. I don't look at emotions. Here are a couple of facts for you. The Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco currently has 2 job postings on their website. One is for a crypto architect. The other one is for an asset manager for central bank digital currencies. The Federal Reserve System, the System Consensus, which is their careers, excuse me, the Federal Reserve System Careers just deleted their job posting for a crypto architect for the CBDC. So if you think these things won't happen in America, I can give you a list of about 700 things that 10 years ago I thought would never happen in America that have already happened. It's time for us to pay attention. It's time for us to talk to people. It's time for us to motivate others to truly pay attention to these things and not alien hearings in Congress. This is the end game for tyranny. If they control the money, they control a nation. There's been about 50 tyrants throughout history who have expressed that if you give me control of the money, I will control the nation. So the CBDC is the end game of tyranny, and we're living in it. We are truly, truly living in it. So how does this happen? Well, it happens through political corruption. I mean, that's the one thing. I had a great conversation with someone I really respect. So if they're watching this, don't take this the wrong way. But he said to me very point blank, I don't believe in the evil politician theory. I believe in the stupid politician theory, which I understand. We all want to be kind. We all want to be nice. But political correctness is just another form of censorship. So if we're being honest, let's look at things for what they are factually. If you put a stupid person in an ultimate position of power and they make decisions that destroy a nation, is that not an evil politician? We have to look at these things from this perspective. We're approaching maybe the most, not maybe, definitely the most important election in US history, because all of these things are happening. They are happening as we speak. Now, in the middle of this, we have to look internationally to see what's happening. So in order to look internationally, Donald Trump put a very funny tweet up the other day, not the other day, excuse me, in 2014. He said, if aliens are real, it'll only be a matter of time until Congress starts sending their planet money. And I thought that tweet was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Now, this is correct because we just went through the whole debt ceiling negotiation, and they said it was a big win because they can only spend $4.2 trillion between now and 2024. But don't worry, they're going to be responsible about it and probably won't hit that number. Well, numbers don't lie. In the last 15 days, we've added $1.15 trillion. I'm going to repeat that, $1.15 trillion to the national budget in less than a little over 2 weeks. $1 trillion is an unimaginable amount of money. We use that term all the time. We're desensitized to the term trillion. When I was a kid, you wanted to be a millionaire. Then all of a sudden there were billionaires, and now there's approaching to be trillionaires. Well, if you counted $1 a minute, it would take you 32,000 years to count to $1 trillion. That's how much money that is. It's a tremendous amount of money. We just added $1.15 trillion more to the national deficit. We have sent over $200 billion to the nation of Ukraine, who, by the way, Zelensky today extended martial law in Ukraine for another 90 days, killing their parliamentary elections. Okay, this is how tyranny works. Martial law stops elections and keeps those in power in power. That'll never happen in America, right? We'll see. We're approaching war. If we look internationally right now, the Russian defense minister is currently in North Korea meeting with Kim Jong-un. The Chinese just sent an entire fleet of gear, something that could outfit every Russian soldier on the planet from China. And we have to watch the Black Sea. If I can give you one thing from a geopolitical standpoint, I would say all eyes on the Black Sea. For the last 9 months, really since sanctions were imposed on Russia, which have completely failed, the Russian economy is pretty much flourishing. Their ruble is strong. If we really look at what's happening here, the Russians have been laundering their oil against these sanctions through Saudi Arabia using our dollar. At the same time, we're seeing 60 nations join BRICS, which is basically an anti-dollar movement, which I'll explain in a moment. But in the Black Sea, what just happened? This is a major port for exporting Russian oil. The Ukrainians basically just came out and said in a press release that they will consider any Russian vessel in the Black Sea to be a warfaring vehicle. That tells me, just thinking critically, that they're looking at bombing an oil tanker. That would be a great way to kickstart a new war, bring in new people, and drive up the price of energy, really at a difficult time. Because if we look at the price of energy, again, don't worry, everything's fine per Janet Yellen. Inflation's at 3%. That's why the Fed keeps raising rates, which, by the way, is going to send us into deflation and potentially stagflation. Ultimately, in the middle of those two, by every definition that you will ever find of deflation, a financial crisis is inevitable. But if we look at the price of energy, just look at the gas pumps. Look at them today. Look at them yesterday and 3 days ago. On Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, on the 25th and 26th of July, it was the largest two-day spike in gasoline prices since March of 2022, which was one of the fastest jumps in the price of gasoline ever. We're about to approach that area again. Going back to the Nord Stream 1 and 2 and the GDP that I talked about, is pretty systematic to understand that the only place that profited from the destruction of Nord Stream 1 and 2 was the American government. This is a conspiracy theory that I was accused of months ago. However, a gentleman named General McChrystal, who was a 4-star general under Barack Obama, was caught on video saying that that's exactly what happened. And I'll be happy to share the video. Maybe we'll put the video on there and share it with you. I'm not saying that's what's happened. I just found it very coincidental that the exact theory in my mind as to what was happening with the price of natural gas here, that it was kind of somewhat backdoor verified. And I will say somewhat backdoor verified. I wasn't there. It's a video, and God knows what they do on video anymore. But keeping our focus on international relations and energy and all these other things, we have to focus on the US dollar. Today, the GDP report, which all you have to do is get out of the bubble. If you're an accredited investor, a wealthy person, go talk to normal people. Talk to normal people on the street. There's no way in the world they'll believe that jobs are being created and the GDP is flourishing. It's just not possible. The economic conditions just aren't there for the average person. The average person, by the way, supplies 83% of the world, of this country's disposable income for goods and services. Major part of the GDP is normal people. Now we have to look at BRICS. BRICS, essentially, it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They've also had applications come in from 60 nations. I think there's 16 nations that have been accepted. This is an alliance built upon essentially defying the US dollar. The BRICS nations, especially India, China, and Russia, have been stockpiling gold for anywhere between 12 and 8 years at mass quantities. You're talking metric tons of gold. There's two reasons they do that. Number one, if they have gold, they can avoid sanctions from the US dollar. Per the IMF, the US dollar accounted for 59% of global foreign exchange reserves. 70%. So 70% in 2010, 70% of global foreign exchange reserves were held in US dollars. In 2022, that was only 59%. The numbers haven't come out because the year's not over, but everyone's projecting between 52 and 53. So we're watching the decline as the global reserve currency. It's inevitable to see that. So why are they stockpiling gold? Again, to avoid sanctions. If they can't use the dollar, everyone will accept gold in international trade. It's just more expensive to ship and make payments with. At the same time, they've been talking about creating a gold-backed BRICS currency to compete against the US dollar. Now, I've had a chance to speak with Steve Forbes and many other economists around the world, and this actually is something that is probably all talk. In reality, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa only have one thing in common: they don't like us. They don't trust each other. They're geographically far away, and they would have to determine who holds and audits and manages the gold. So a gold-backed BRICS currency is a very low probability. I wouldn't discount it, but it's a very low probability. What is a higher probability is the fact that they will go to some sort of blockchain exchange rate tokening system to make international cross-border payments. There are about 500 different options for them to use. I don't get into which crypto to buy. It's pretty obvious. I use the term Bitcoin because it's the most obvious. It's the most well-known. But cryptocurrency is a whole nother conversation. You certainly need to do your research with that. However, if we look at these numbers from the IMF and what they're talking about, we have to look at actions and to see if this is real. Last month, China traded 49% of their international exchange or cross-border payments were made in yuan. That is a 40% increase from the previous month. At the same time, they've teamed up with Iran to start dumping the dollar and buying the yuan in the currency markets. So while the world will tell you everything is fine, I'm not telling you to be scared. I'm not scared. I'm not nervous. I'm just informed. If you're truly informed, there's no reason to have emotions. I always tell people, stay calm, stay level, see what happens next, because that is the attitude you need to take at this point in time. One area I am concerned about is a mounting war with potential, nuclear weapons being used, and the fact that we've been giving away all of our ammunition and military equipment to a foreign nation that's widely known to be corrupt, and it was said to be corrupt by Bill Gates and Joe Biden on camera less than 10 years ago. This is a very difficult situation to understand from a logical perspective because it makes no sense what we're doing with Ukraine. At the same time, I think that we all need to keep ourselves very grounded and prepare for a commodity super cycle. I can only see that moving forward. If we're heading into deflation, that's also called debt deflation, meaning that any debt laden investment or risky investment or equity type thing or derivatives, they generally get punished. Commodities get rewarded. That is a big thing to look forward to. I think that we are approaching this era right now. This is the information I have for you today on July 27th, 2023. I will wrap this up by saying in the commodity super cycle, I do make some recommendations for my own portfolio. Where I'm putting my own money is I'm putting my own money in the precious metals, gold, silver, and if you know what I'm talking about, brass and lead. I'm also looking at raw land, oil and gas investments, and some form of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, whatever you're thinking about, but have some sort of decentralized, something that's away from the central bank that you can use for payments. This is an important period in time. I also like to state that this entire program is brought to you by King Operating Corporation in Dallas, Texas. We are an oil and gas fund with tremendous benefits for investors, a 100% write-off against AGI, monthly passive income, which is tax advantaged. And we, as far as we know, we're the only oil and gas company that includes our assets for our investors. So there's also a multiple on capital potential with the investment. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Our contact information is in the video below. God bless you all. I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to the next Rice Report with you.